You're joining me now, Republican West Virginia Congressman Riley Moore. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rick, thanks so much for having me on.
I'd really like to get your thoughts on President Trump's efforts at negotiating a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, but also your opinion on some of your congressional Republican colleagues who are eyeing a tougher approach with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Where do you stand on all this?
Well, I think right now, Rick, what we need to do is not bind the hands of the administration when they're in the middle of a negotiation. I think Secretary Rubio put it correctly when, look, if they decided to lever some more sanctions through legislation here in Congress, ultimately that could take months, if not years sometimes, to actually bite. And then it's going to not bring Russia to the negotiating table. It's going to push them further away from it. So why right now would we want to hem in the administration at all when President Trump is making historic steps towards actually providing peace in this conflict in Ukraine? And we need to support the president in his efforts in the way that he is undertaking this currently.
Yeah, you would expect to see this kind of thing from Democrats, but not necessarily Republicans. You also just wrote an op-ed in the National Interest about President Trump's airstrikes on Iran and how it can shape America's military engagement. Do you think that bombing mission, the bombing of those nuclear facilities, will act as a deterrent to Putin?
I think that any action that we take like that does act as a deterrent, not only to Putin, but also to China. Also, don't forget a little bit of a deterrent effect there, having a B-2 bomber fly over Putin's head when he decided to come to Alaska for the initial talks with President Trump. But at the end of the day, what I'm talking about here in terms of prioritized deterrence is trying to prevent us from being in conflicts to begin with. And part of the way that we can bolster deterrence here in the United States is by reindustrializing our country, right? Strong economies with the capacity to manufacture are a threat. This is why China is a threat. They have stated that they'd like to represent 50% of the world's GDP at some point. Sounds familiar. That was the United States post-World War II, was over 50% of the world's GDP, because you have to have the capacity to be able to stage a conflict long periods of time and have the required industrial base to do that. Now, we have shortfalls in that. Remember in Ukraine, when we started funding the Ukrainians and providing them weapons, we had a shortfall in our ability to provide them artillery shells. We are not in a position right now to be able to deter great power conflict like in China. In Iran, that strike that we did, it does deter other countries from looking at trying to establish a nuclear program that does threaten the United States and our people here at home. But the idea of deterrence, the end of the day, is to keep us out of conflicts, but also keep us safe here at home and provide a credible threat to our enemies around the world that there is a huge price to be paid if you are going to mess with the United States, which I think does provide peace at the end of the day.
Yeah, peace through strength is what the president always liked to say. One other thing, Congressman, you've been outspoken against a recent Philadelphia District Court's decision against President Trump's religious conscience rule and Little Sisters of the Poor. It's a defeat for the Catholic nuns and their long-running dispute over government contraceptive mandates, even though the Supreme Court had previously ruled in their favor. In the time we have left, Congressman, your thoughts on the recent lower court decision. Is that an infringement of religious rights?
It's absolutely an infringement on religious rights. And Rick, at the outset of your program, you were talking about kids and trans kids and boys' bathrooms and all this other nonsense that's going on in this country right now. You know, are there no cultural norms left in the United States that the left is not willing to tear down? We're going to force the Little Sisters of the Poor to provide abortions and contraception. It is directly in violation of their religious beliefs, which they thought were protected under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993. But this lower court has taken another swing at the nuns, the Little Sisters of the Poor. There's nothing sacred to the left in this country, but that's why we have to stand up and fight and say enough is enough. There are norms in this country. There's norms in this culture. you all are going to lose and we're going to win the end of the day.
Yep, we're gonna keep shining a light on this too, Congressman Riley Moore. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me, Rick.